Welcome to today's 25-minute webcast, Selecting the Right SAP Opportunity for Value Creation. Our host today is Proterra CTO Sean Donaldson. And during the webcast, please put any questions you may have in the chat, and Sean will get to as many as possible at the completion. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jamie, for opening that up. Appreciate it. And thanks, everyone, for making the time. I know your most valuable asset in today's world is your time. So I appreciate you taking the time to spend with us today, and we are going to try to make it as valuable as possible. As I'm talking today, I'm going to go through a bunch of different topics. And if you have questions, thoughts, comments you want to make, please put them in the chat. We'll try to address them at the end. If not, we can always follow up afterwards and talk about them either one-on-one or in a different forum. All right, so I'll jump right in. I'm the CTO for Proterra. I've been in managed services around SAP for almost about 20 years, a little over 20 years, actually. Spent a long time with a company called Secure24 and then NTT Managed Services, and super happy to be at Proterra today. We're doing some really exciting things, and I'll jump into a few of those topics here in a second. So kind of kick it off, if I see kind of in the list, we've got a number of people who have been on either previous webinars or even Proterra customers today, but for those that aren't familiar with Proterra and who we are a managed services company that specializes in running business critical applications on public cloud with a high degree of focus on security, compliance, and governance. We like to look at it as modernize and optimize and transform enterprise workloads, delivering that with a proactive services model. What you can see is we break that up into a couple of different categories between modern cloud, modern workspace, and modern ERP, which for Proterra, modern ERP is SAP. It's one of our core capabilities, has been for Proterra for almost 20 years, and something we're continuing to drive that modernization into the future with SAP on these hyperscalers. We're going to talk a lot more about that today, and how does running SAP on a hyperscaler deliver more value? How can I start getting more value out of those different additional PaaS services and capabilities that the hyperscalers provide that maybe I couldn't always get in my past lives on private cloud or in different environments? So we'll dive into some of those topics today. The first thing we like to always talk about when we talk about kind of moving to the public cloud, using the hyperscalers, the ideas of digital transformation, is that first of all, migration doesn't equal modernization. What we like to look at, and we'll talk about a lot today, is this idea of going on a journey. And this journey revolves around a theme of continuous transformation and continuous innovation. So it's not where I just move once and I come back 3 to 5 years later and maybe see what I can do to improve cost or optimization or features. You know, part of that moving to the hyperscaler that we'll talk about is this idea of being on a continuous journey and seeing how I can continuously leverage some of these capabilities that are adjacent to my SAP kind of ecosystem to drive value for the business in new and interesting ways. The first topic we'll hit on is we'll hit on this topic and this idea of moving my SAP workloads to the cloud in general. And in today's world, the idea of, you know, what is you'll hear things like well-architected framework and design patterns and migration patterns and these different ideas. And that's something that's table stakes for Proterra. We've partnered with the hyperscalers, AWS, Azure, GCP, and we've created best practices and design templates, instance size templates, monitoring around those different areas. A common question we get, though, is, so when should I do this S4 migration, right? Should I do an S4 migration at the same time as I'm moving to a hyperscaler, or should I do it afterwards, do a lift and shift and do it afterwards? When's the right time for me to make that transformation? And really the answer to that is it depends, right? And typical engineering answer, right? It depends. But it does depend, and ultimately the important thing to understand with that is neither answer is wrong. It really comes down to what is the timeline that your business has? How quickly do you want to move to the public cloud versus how much change do you want to take on right now as a business? If you have a lot of time and it's the right opportunity for your business to make the transformation at the same time, we see many customers doing that and saying, hey, I have an extended time frame. I've got it's the right time to engage with my functional partners to make this transformation, go from a traditional ECC to S4. I want to make this transformation now as I'm moving into the hyperscaler. It's right for my business. My business has the cycles to do all the testing and validation, verification, different aspects with that. And we see people do that, and we support that number of different ways. But what we also see a number of customers that say, for whatever reason, I've got a TSA in place, transition services agreement, or whether I have aging hardware, and say, you know what, I got to make a decision. I got to move. I just want to do a lift and shift of what I existingly have. I'm going to move it into a hyperscaler. And then once I'm in that hyperscaler, we can start to look at what does that next step mean, whether it's S4, whether it's other optimizations around the environment. And we find that to be a great migration pattern as well, where it's okay, let's alleviate the immediate risk. Whether it's, again, aging hardware, aging data center, particular costs where you have to do a big CapEx refresh to refresh the hardware, mitigate that immediate risk and be able to just do that migration into the public cloud. We're going to do a lift and shift migration. It's going to be very much as is in many ways, and have that opportunity to say, okay, I've minimized the change to my business, to my user experience. Their users are going to leave on a Friday, come back in on a Monday. They're not going to know anything changed, right? And that's the experience you can deliver with a lift and shift type migration. And then I'm going to tackle the S4 migration when it makes more sense for my business, and look at some of these other areas as we go through. So I just wanted to kind of touch on that a little bit, just because it's a really common question we get as we look at the different kind of migration patterns to the cloud. And if you're on this webinar before in our past, we kind of went into some of the same detail as well. Rest assured, though, in the next couple slides, we're going to start diving into a lot more detail on some of the other capabilities you get around the hyperscalers that we're starting to have some really great success with our customers. And we want to talk about that a little bit more, about how do we continue to take that journey up a notch with the business. So this is an example that we see, and I touched on this theme earlier, and I'm going to kind of keep touching on this theme a bit, is this theme of it being a continuous journey with the hyperscalers, right? We've all made the experience of, again, going to a large private cloud provider. I move my SAP workload there. It sits there for 3 to 5 years. Then we talk about what does it look like to do a refresh, contract renewal, something else, right? And that's where, when we're talking about moving to the hyperscalers, we change a lot of that. We change a lot of that mindset. And that mindset is, hey, I'm going to move my SAP workload into the hyperscaler, but I'm going to work with Proterra, my partner, and say, okay, how do I drive this idea of continuous innovation, continuous optimization, and through these workloads? And what we see is common patterns for this, and we'll dive into more details in these in a couple other slides. Is usually I'm going to do the cloud migration right away. Okay, great. I've got workloads in the public cloud that are IaaS. Now I'm going to look at things like optimizing and right sizing, right? Just very basic ideas of FinOps and financial operations of how do I start making sure I'm on the right size instances. But now I'm going to start looking at things like data intelligence, right? Or modern workspace. So what you do is you start using these additional PaaS services that are adjacent to my SAP landscape in the public cloud to start adding more value for the business. So when we talk about modern workspace, what that really means is how do my users connect to my SAP application? Well, we all know that we're in this new world today, this post-COVID world, and this theme of future of work continues to permeate. And the way that people work and people interact with their enterprise applications is different than it ever was before. And what the public cloud allows us to do is it gives us a number of tools and capabilities. You'll hear words like zero trust thrown out. And what those are is really mindsets and concepts of how do we allow users to connect from anywhere in the world securely, effectively, without making it overly burdensome for them, to their enterprise applications and workloads in a way that's convenient for them, right? So both secure, convenient, efficient. How do I do all those things from when workers are now working from anywhere? And that's the idea of modern workspace and future of work. We see similar ideas when it comes to data intelligence and data analytics. We'll talk about those a little bit later too. And again, it's this idea of how do I take this journey with data to go from reporting that might be a few days old to now real-time reporting and real-time dashboards, to now enriching that data with other sources, to now maybe even applying things like machine learning, AI, data analytics to it to even get predictive on it, right? And again, these are things that don't happen overnight, and it's a roadmap of continuous innovation that happens with it. And we'll talk a little bit more about FinOps and what that really means, and how do I get my business there? How do I use experimentation to get my business there and drive those type of outcomes? A lot of these ideas that I've already talked about when I talk about FinOps and data-driven, we'll talk about DevOps too, and what does that mean now? How do I get my SAP basis resources, my SAP resources embracing DevOps? What does this mean for them in their world? I know what it means for my developers and for my operations folks, but how does that wrap into my SAP world as well? And we can talk a little bit about some of the success we've driven at Proterra with our SAP basis teams getting truly integrated with that. And for us, a lot of that revolves around the theme, again, whether it's FinOps or data, this idea of IT and the business getting more and more aligned, right? And that's a theme I think we're going to continue to see and continue to want to embrace. And what we like to work with our partners on is continuing to take on some of these tasks for our customers to be able to hopefully allow them to focus more and more on, okay, what are these business outcomes I want to drive? How can I use more of these public cloud capabilities to drive these business outcomes that my business is looking for? The first one is FinOps, and this is one that's kind of near and dear to my heart. I absolutely love the capabilities that the public cloud gives us to look at my financial operations now. It gives a capability to break down costs and break down my spend in ways that I was never really able to do before. I've spent many years running private clouds, global private clouds, and trying to do the per application cost analysis and cost breakdown can be challenging. Not impossible, but challenging to truly break down all those costs and get a view on it. We just did another project for a very large oil and gas company, and one of the things they really enjoyed was, because of the deployment and the migration to Azure that we performed for them. When you're doing that, you go through a process of tagging all the resources, right? So all the systems, resources, services start to get tags on them, and you can start allocating those tags in different ways. And what it does, it gives a tremendous ability to get financial visibility into what's deployed. Now, that can be used a number of different ways for different businesses. In this particular case, they were using it as a way to charge back different business units. So across an SAP landscape, there might be various other systems that support different business units, different some non-SAP servers that are part of that mix, and or they're supporting experimentation and testing in different areas. Need to spin up different landscapes, different areas. Let's say I want to do a test of a particular tool. Well, now what I have the capability to do is actually set a budget for that test. I can say, okay, I'm going to budget this much money, and I can track how much money is going towards that experimentation or that test. Whether it's a data project, whether it's a additional landscape I'm spinning up, handful of servers doing additional tasks, it gives you these capabilities to experiment, to break down costs, to charge back individual business units and get the visibility from them. It gives you some of these capabilities that you never had before. Obviously, from a partner perspective with Proterra, we look at this very much as saying, hey, our job with this is we want to make sure that we're enabling our customers to have this capability, but also we want to make sure that you're getting the most value for your dollar that you're spending with the hyperscalers. So we want to make sure that money is being spent the best way possible. Easy examples of that we've seen with other customers that we've adopted and taken on is we had one client, just as an example, that moving some of their non-prod backups from being on from globally redundant storage to locally redundant storage actually saved about $50,000 a month. And these are small changes that can be made in environments that can align with what the corporate risk is, what the corporate governance is, but can drive really meaningful savings and help fund other initiatives to drive greater business value than spending on infrastructure. And we want to make sure that we're acting as that trusted partner to drive our customers to use these FinOps capabilities to not only show what their spend is, how it's broken down, but also show how much have I saved, how can I plan and budget better for experimentation and testing and new capabilities, and how can I truly show my business that we're getting the most value for every dollar that we're spending on the hyperscaler. So I'm sure this isn't a shock to anyone, but data is pretty important, right? So data is an amazing part of everyone's business that provides just a tremendous amount of insight and visibility. And when we look at SAP and the data that's in SAP, it's just a tremendous source of business data. What we love to be able to do is work with our customers, and a common question we get asked when we talk about some of the data analytics capabilities that are in public cloud, and all of the public clouds have their different data lakes and BI platforms. A common question we get is, hey, do any of these replace SAP BW? And again, I'll give the engineering answer, maybe, right? But what we see as a more common theme is they complement BW and don't necessarily replace it. So there's probably a lot of SAP specific business reports already created in BW that are providing value. And we see customers, for the most part, maintaining that and keeping those in place for what they are. But we see a tremendous value drive happening is, now I want to take my SAP data and I'm going to feed it into, whether it's Azure Synapse in Azure, whether it's Snowflake in AWS, whether it's different data lake type technologies, and AWS has about a dozen other kind of data type solutions that you can stitch together within it as well. But when I take that SAP data, but now what I want to do with it is I want to enrich it from different sources, right? So whether that source is Salesforce, whether it's SQL servers on a manufacturing floor, and what I want to do is I want to take that first step towards kind of data analytics, and I want to say, hey, my first step is going to be decision support. And for us, what decision support means is that I'm providing the business now real-time dashboards fed from multiple data sources that are important to them. And just giving those real-time dashboards, it's amazing how much value you can give the business. Where historically, maybe it would have taken days or even weeks to get these reports together. Now they can truly bring them up, whether it's Tableau or Power BI or whatever tools are, from visualization perspective, they're most comfortable with, but be able to pull up truly real-time reports that are relevant to them on the business. Whether it's extruder utilization in a manufacturing plant, whether it's sales data from a retail store, whatever that data might be, it's that ability to give real-time reports can be meaningful. What we see then is that's the first step then on that journey of saying, okay, now that I'm doing that, now how do I continue to take those steps along that journey to now apply things like machine learning or artificial intelligence to start doing things like predictive analytics, right? And this is, again, this whole journey and process isn't something that happens, in overnight. It's something that happens over months and even years, right? As you kind of mature this process, develop it, and grow it through the process with the various tools. The other really, really cool thing that the public cloud gives, when I'm talking about these data projects, if anyone remembers, 5 to 10 years ago, when we talked about a big data project, we were talking about trying to go to the CFO and spend millions of dollars on hardware to build a giant Hadoop cluster and hire some data scientists. The really nice thing that the public cloud gives us now is this ability to experiment with data. So what that means is that I can now, if I want to, I can set a budget. Again, use FinOps, set a budget. I can say, hey, I want a budget. I want to do some experimentation with data analytics. And what the public cloud allows us to do is to kind of stick our toe in and spend a relatively small amount of money over a set period of time with very low commitments and be able to start testing it and seeing the value I get. And as I can show the business that I'm driving value from it, I can continue to expand that project and expand that that portfolio. And that's something we never had the capability to do. At least I never had the capability to do in a private cloud environment, right? Is that ability just to experiment with big data and all of these other services, these cognitive services and analytics and machine learning, and doing them at very small stages and low cost stages. As I learn these with the business, what's the most valuable dashboards for the business, and kind of go through that process. And I think it's a huge opportunity the public cloud affords us that frankly we never really had before. And then DevOps. DevOps is also something I'm fairly passionate about. A lot of it revolves around the idea, the philosophy, there's a technology side of DevOps, but there's also an operational change side of DevOps. And a lot of the operational change side of DevOps is this idea of different parts of the business breaking down silos and different parts of the business working together. So what we've done at Proterra, as we've implemented DevOps philosophies through our organization, it's been amazing to watch our SAP basis resources really embrace DevOps tools like Ansible and Terraform to be able to now start working collaboratively with the operations teams and the automation development teams to be able to now automate some of the basic tasks, right? So some of these basic ideas start becoming, whether it's GitHub or GitLab, you start having a shared code repository between your development teams, your operations teams, and even your application teams. They start using a shared code repository for all of the work that they're doing. It's centralized, it's secure, you can run compliance and hardening standards against it. And it allows everyone, and it democratizes the idea of automation and allows everyone to contribute to it. And from there, again, you start getting these great capabilities of operations and basis working together and start delivering things like, hey, using Ansible, using a number of these different tools, why don't we automate the whole refresh process, right? Why don't we automate a whole DR process? Things like patching, which can be time consuming, things got to be shut down in the right order and different things like that. We can start automating those tasks as well. And those are some of the really great opportunities we see with SAP becoming part of this DevOps journey and part of this DevOps kind of experience that is we see our operations team, development teams, and business teams kind of already starting to embrace. So we talked a bit about modern work and distributed work. And again, this is an area that we feel that the public cloud offers some really great capabilities for that were challenges potentially in the past. And some of those areas are, well, how do I access SAP? How do I make sure my users can access SAP in a secure manner? More importantly, how can they do it if they're working anywhere in the world? They should be able to access SAP and the other business critical systems, regardless if they're in an office, in a coffee shop, regardless if they're in, any number of countries that we approve. Many times there'll be a handful of countries that we would maybe block traffic from for various security reasons, but the majority of the globe would probably allow access and allow users to connect from. And how do they get that same experience? And on one side, we want to make that experience good for them, easy to use. On the other side, we want to make it highly secure, right? And historically, I'm sure we've all made the experience of the security team being the team of no. We really love taking the philosophy of doing security with the business and not to the business, and challenging that mindset using some of these modern capabilities, whether it's virtual desktops or even at AWS reInvent, they just announced some capabilities for secure web access only based on particular users, right? So there's new capabilities and new technologies that are being deployed consistently that meet that challenge of saying, okay, how do I make my users both drive ease of use and security at the same time, right? And that's really the holy grail that we're looking for. And we like to leverage this idea of or these capabilities that public cloud give us to drive these outcomes for our users. A lot of these revolve around that. I'm sure we've heard it. It's kind of become a bit of a buzzword in today's nomenclature, is zero trust. And it's truly just this idea of saying, okay, how do I allow my users, no matter where they are, to connect? How do I allow my contractors to get in now? We're all worried about supply chain attacks, right? And one of our contractors or suppliers being compromised. How do I make sure that they are securely accessing these environments, and it's in a controlled manner, and I've got the right controls and capabilities in place? And that, again, that's where a lot of these services that revolve around the SAP environment in the public cloud space afford us capabilities that were much more challenging in the past, and give us some flexibility for scaling up, scaling down, changing things. If I need to spin up 2,000 virtual desktops because of some event that happened, I need to get all of my users in. I can do it over a weekend. We've actually done it for a customer before and spun up 2,000 virtual desktops over the course of a weekend and allowed them to connect. We're not ordering hardware capacity or doing any of those things. Then we spun them back down about 30 days later. It was just a particular challenge the customer had for a short period of time, but the public cloud allows us that flexibility, and we allowed all their users then to connect still securely managed in a conforming way. So these are some of the areas when you hear about, kind of modern workspace, future of work, that we feel the public cloud just brings some really amazing capabilities to that, but we love to work with our clients on driving solutions for. So I'll wrap it up there. If there's other things you want to dive into in more detail, do not hesitate to reach out to us. We'd love to talk more about it.